violations committed against our indigenous peoples is being given full attention under the Aquino government. Rights Commission Chairperson Etta Rosales leading a crusade to guarantee that abuses are not tolerated and those guilty of harming them are brought before the bar of justice. Many of these violations are committed in areas where illegal elements backed by local officials are engaged in logging and mining inside their ancestral domain. Joining us tonight is Human Rights Commission Chairperson Etta Rosales. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening, Angel.
Ma'am, how serious is the problem of human rights violations committed against our indigenous peoples, and where are these commonly committed, which areas of the country, and what are the most common crimes committed by the perpetrators of these violations?
Well, you can look at the IPs, the indigenous peoples, as among the most vulnerable sectors of Philippine society because usually they're caught in the crossfire between rebel groups, armed groups, and the Philippine troops, no? So you would usually find the vulnerability in contested areas, in areas of internal armed conflict. And sometimes they're caught in the crossfire and they're used as either members of CAFGU, if you belong to the government, or members of the rebel groups, like the NPAs, for instance. That's one. Another area would probably be the mining operations or illegal logging operations, because usually in these mining operations, the big businesses and the Philippine government, to protect the investors, would ask the military or the police, to help even the security guards that guard the mining operations. And if you recall, the latest case about Tampakan, this is in Davao del Sur, the Bilaans, the family of what's his name, Capion, Juvie Capion, the mother and the two children were killed, and allegedly by the military, who claimed that there was an encounter that took place there. But actually, the Bilaans have long been resisting the possible mining of Tampakan, from the SMI, which is one of the biggest mining corporations in mining companies in the Philippines. Then you also have the DPO, way up in north in the Nueva Vizcaya area, where the DPO mines are now being looked into by Oceana Gold. This time, this is an Australian outfit with New Zealand and Canadian interests. And again, the DPO, in the DPO you have IPs, indigenous peoples, who are actually migrants of that area from the Cordilleras, but have been, so harassed even 2 years ago. So we made a lot of noise because they put up fences. The children were not able to go to school, and the people suffered so much because their natural habitat, their natural agriculture was so disturbed by the businesses of Oceana Gold. Now we made a lot of noise there. There was a resolution, but then afterwards the Oceana Gold started backing out. But this time they've started again, building villages, livelihood programs for the people in order to get them to accept them in their operations.
So, ma'am, how true are reports that those engaged in such illegal logging and mining are perpetrators in grabbing the lands of our IPs, and they have the support of local politicians? In what areas of the country do they happen?
Well, in several areas, many areas, no? For instance, Higaonons in the Agusuri area have long been wanting to own their ancestral lands, but are frustrated precisely by the refusal of big businesses who do not want to give up their lands. I do remember that when we did our work there and organizing work, we were able to get some funding for the budget of the Higaonons in order to implement the IPRA law. But that took a long time, and usually Higaonons you would have the army and then the rebel groups along the Agusuri area fighting against each other and having the Higaonos caught in the crossfire. They're all over the place. I mean, you mentioned it. We have about, what, 15% of the population is made up of IPs, and then you've got about, I think, more than 110 major tribes. So they're all over the Philippines.
Yes.
But the ancestral lands are being contested because despite the IPRA law, which is the law of the IPs, they do not, the big landowners do not allow for these lands to be given to the IPs.
So ma'am, this is pretty tough for our indigenous people. So how important is their role, especially in protecting our forest, let's say in the Caraga region? The president has ordered a log ban. What role should they play?
Well, they could be forest guards, forest rangers, because, and you know why? The indigenous peoples have knowledge that is alien to the rest of us, because they lived in the forests, they live in the mountains, they live in those areas. They are very familiar with the flora and fauna of the area, and they know how to take care of the biodiversity. That is very, very important, because the kind of knowledge that they have is something that is alien to the rest of us. So I think that, and I've asked some government authorities that their indigenous knowledge of biodiversity should in fact be developed, so that this can also be shared to the non-tribes, even in major schools and conventional schools.
All right, ma'am, okay, before we move on, we also have on the line right now Secretary Ramon Paje. We will also have Secretary Ramon Paje later on the line to answer issues on illegal logging as well. Anyway, let's proceed, ma'am. So how true are the reports that our IPs are also used paramilitary units or private armies of politicians?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's what I said a while ago. They are often used because they're powerless.
So this is true, ma'am?
Yeah, yes, of course. They're powerless, they're vulnerable, and they don't have access. They don't have access to land, they don't have access to the resources, and they don't have access to information. That in fact there is a very good law, the IPRA law, that belongs to them, that provides for their rights to land, to ancestral land. And because of this, because of the absence of access to information, they become vulnerable to politicians who could exploit them very easily. And as I said a while ago, they are either made into calf goose or they're made into members of the rebel army, and they're usually used as cannon fodder. In other words, sila yung unang pinaglalaban sa isa't isa. Yun.
So lastly, ma'am, how about a final word coming from you regarding especially our indigenous people, their rights, and what else can be done to protect them from all this?
We can do a whole lot. Certainly this kind of information campaign that is being done by NewsLife in this program is something that in fact should be encouraged, and I think that maybe discussions of more of the life of the indigenous people should be made, and then we should also look into, calling on government, calling on DENR to try and precisely implement the laws that belong to them. Very recently, the writ of Kalikasan, that this is a judicial law by the Supreme Court, has been used to petition for the protection of the rights of the indigenous peoples of Nueva Vizcaya in the DPO against the Oceana Gold. So that is an example, I think, of what we should in fact be doing.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us tonight on NewsLife. That was Chairperson Etta Rosales, Commission on Human Rights. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.